Hello, Whitefish! Earlier this year, reports began surfacing across the country of immigrants, and even some U.S. citizens, being detained and deported in large numbers. In the beginning, I honestly didn't think this was something we would see much of up here in northwest Montana. It became clear, though, that would not be the case. The Flathead Valley, and even Whitefish, has found itself at the center of some high-profile detainments, leading to protests and even a lawsuit by a Venezuelan man working on a job site on Whitefish Lake, when, on his way home, he was pulled over for a broken taillight and subsequently sent to an ICE detention center for a week in Tacoma, Washington, before being released. According to court documents, the Venezuelan had been approved by the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services to legally work and reside here, and he even had a real ID, which, to be honest, I don't even have one of those yet, and I need to get one, so thank you for the reminder. Also, in Evergreen, a Honduran mother and her teenage daughter were detained after witnessing a traffic accident and attempted to help the victims. They were also detained and sent to an ICE detention center in Texas, where they stayed for over 3 weeks before being cleared and released. As of September, DHS has reported that 2 million undocumented immigrants have been removed from the United States. To learn more about these cases, I'm joined by members of Flathead Democracy, a local grassroots organization dedicated to civic education, community building, as well as protesting, which they did during the detainment of the individuals in these cases. Well, we're going to talk about some fun stuff today, some dynamic, exciting things, some very important topics. But first, can we just go around and introduce each other? I see everyone around town here in Whitefish, like we're all locals here. You're my neighbor. You work at the local bakery and stuff, and I've seen you around as well. So why don't we start by introducing ourselves?
My name is Aggie Putnam. I'm 25 years old. I was born in Kalispell, and I'm a career pastry baker, and I love to play roller derby. Those are the most interesting things about me.
That's awesome.
My name's Colton Little. I live in Columbia Falls, but I am a friend of the entire valley. I'm a student, and so I have various hobbies. Some of them are singing. Some of them are more aligned with being active in the community, volunteering, and going to city council meetings.
That's awesome.
My name is Leonette Galaz. I am your friendly neighborhood community organizer. I moved to Whitefish in 2020 with a great COVID migration that brought many people back home. I can't say it was back home for me, but I did live and work in Essex, Montana in 2019. So like many people who have worked and lived seasonally in the park, they find their way back here eventually. And so it turns out a lot of my friends also have that experience of having lived and worked in the park and then eventually coming back to live here full time. And so after living here and working in a restaurant for a little while, I looked around and saw a lot of issues that I was concerned about, like affordability and affordable housing, things like that, and realized that I was not alone in my difficulties of trying to survive and pay rent. And so that's when I started community organizing.
And I think I first heard about you because you ran for a school board.
I did.
And that was, I think, it was like the COVID school board.
Yeah, it was during COVID.
Yeah,
it was towards the end of COVID.
A very contentious election.
It was.
Yeah.
Because somebody who was running had written a very nasty letter to the school board, which came out. And so, it sort of highlighted the end of civility in politics, that particular time period. But it's, as we can see now, like it makes a lot of sense given the state of things after the pandemic. You have a whole community a whole country that went through a really traumatic event. And I think we're kind of seeing the results of that.
We are definitely seeing the repercussions of that. So to fast forward to why we're here to talk today, this year we've seen a whole new, I don't even know what you call like the wave of immigrants being detained nationally, but it's kind of surprising that we have seen it here locally. I think it surprised a lot of people that we were seeing ICE detentions and reading in the news of immigrants being detained. Can you kind of walk through some of the stories? I think the first high-profile story was the Venezuelan man that was detained. What is his story? Because I only know like kind of the basics of it and what happened there.
Sure, I'll talk about that a little bit. So I think we had started a rapid response team because we knew that people were getting picked up here. That's because we live in a 100-mile radius of the border. So there's like a strip that goes all around the border of the United States. And within that strip, the Border Patrol is very active. And just like here in Whitefish, we have a Border Patrol station right here. They have one up in Babb. They have another one up in, I don't know, somewhere that way, close to Canada. And they have more authority and power in this region than they do in any other part of the United States. But it's different from, Border Patrol is different from ICE. They both work under DHS, but we do not have an active ICE present currently that we're aware of here. It's Border Patrol. Okay. So we knew that Border Patrol was going out and scooping up folks and bringing them to the Border Patrol station, and then later at some point then transferring them to the ICE detention center in Tacoma, Washington. And then from there, sometimes they would be deported, sometimes they would be bounced around to other places. We know that it can be hard to keep track of people once they get into that system. So what we realize is if we could just keep eyes around the valley and see when someone gets picked up, then we could potentially go to the Border Patrol station and protest and then try and get people in touch with legal counsel so that they could have a point of contact and not get lost within the system. That night, our structure that we created, that rapid response team, worked. So we got an early tip, hey, we just saw somebody getting pulled over by the Whitefish PD, and he looks Latino. And the reason that this works is because we know that they're racially profiling. So we can also racially profile, and we can say, hey, if somebody's pulled over and they look Latino or they look brown, or we hear that they speak Spanish, we know that they might call the Border Patrol, even if it's not the Border Patrol that's there. So what we started doing is we started stopping and checking and calling in for someone to go and check physically for every single brown person we saw getting pulled over that looked Latino. And it just seemed like a reasonable response given what was happening. So Becker got picked up he got stopped for a broken taillight by Whitefish PD. He had all of his documentation and paperwork in order for his legal status it was a protected status, I believe. You can't quote me on all this because I am no expert, but Venezuelans had at that time a protected status. Whether or not they still do, I don't know, because the law is constantly changing and they're trying to make everybody who is here legal illegal, which I think is important for people to know. They're like, well, are they legal or are they illegal? And I'm like, does that really even matter? Because they're trying to remove all of these protected statuses that people came here expecting to have, and then they just pull them. So, what really matters here? But then if the president just goes and changes it willy-nilly because he doesn't like Latinos and because America's racist, then what does the legality of it even matter?
Yeah, it's pretty unconstitutional. It's a violation of the Fifth Amendment. Let's look it up.
Who has their pocket constitution?
The Fifth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution provides several protections, including the right to a grand jury indictment, protection against double jeopardy, and the right to avoid self-incrimination. It also guarantees the federal government cannot deprive a person of life, liberty, and property without due process of law. So it's the due process of law.
Oh, that's what you were getting at.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Becker then is detained, but he has like a valid driver's license, valid registration, all these things. And despite all of that, Whitefish PD calls the Border Patrol.
Was it because the guy spoke Spanish and the Whitefish Police Department guy didn't speak Spanish, and so he was trying to didn't know how to talk to him?
They have Google Translate.
Right.
They have that available to them. Actually, all of the police.
Other police do that.
Yeah, and all of the police in our area in Flathead County have access to a translation service that they can call.
Okay.
Sometimes it's slow, so they don't want to use it, but it's technically available. Or that's kind of like on them to figure that out without having to call the Border Patrol. But there was a lot of back and forth about that afterwards, because they were like, oh, we called Border Patrol just to help us translate. And then that turned out later they were like, no, we never call the Border Patrol to help us translate. And then the Border Patrol was like, no, we don't answer to calls to help translate. And we're like, so why are you guys all saying something different? Which could be why they're in a lawsuit right now. Right? But what the body cam footage did say, and they reported this in a recent article, is that you can hear the officer saying, do you want to come check this guy? He speaks Spanish. So I just want to know if you wanted to come check him. Subtext, guy's Latino, you might be able to pick him up and detain him.
But he hadn't done it. It was like he just got pulled over for
broken taillight.
Barely a misdemeanor.
Yeah. And I mean, something that any one of us would be let go for.
So what was he doing up here in So I'll be the guy. Well, what was he doing up here in Montana?
Working.
Yeah.
Yeah. At the time, he had a job. He was working every day, or whatever his schedule was, right?
Sure.
But, had a regular job and was just going to and from work, just living his life. There's a lot of work up here, so it does attract a lot of people from other areas to come here and live and work. And if you want your jobs filled, you gotta provide ways for people to fill them. There's a lot of construction up here, and there's a lot of demand for people to work in construction, and there's a high demand for that labor.
He was picked up by ICE. He was sent to an ICE detention center for like a week or...
Right. So, and what's important to know is that we went and protested at that time until 2 or 3 in the morning. And then we're like, we couldn't tell if he was still there or not. They wouldn't talk to us. We did get him connected with a lawyer and legal counsel working with Valley Neighbors at the time, because they were connected with him and working with him as well. So that was great. They got the legal counsel for him. They got connected. We yelled outside of the Border Patrol for him to sign the G28 form? Yeah.
Is it H28?
G.
It's G.
Yeah.
Okay.
G28 form, which would allow him to speak to a lawyer.
Okay.
So what's tricky is that he shouldn't sign anything. They tell them, don't sign anything. But the problem is, in order to speak to a lawyer, you do have to sign one form. And it's the G28 form.
Okay.
So we all got together and yelled and walked around side all of the buildings yelling, sign G28, firma 28, in Spanish, so that he would hear us. And then we got reports later, he heard us.
Whoa.
And that's how he knew how to sign the form.
Crazy.
So that was a collective, group of people kind of coming together to get all that, to get to that point where that happened, and then it did end up helping him. But so at that point, he has a lawyer. We're not sure if he's there or not. We can't tell, because we've never seen them transport anybody, so we don't know what it looks like. So then we go home, and I'm just there doing some social media in the parking lot in my car, and then I see them start to move. And then I see what the transport looks like, right? It's like a caravan. And then I'm like, damn, like they waited until we left. But that gave us information, right? Which is that they don't like to be watched. They don't like to be monitored. They don't like to have any oversight. And they like to work under the cover of darkness, because in my opinion, what they're doing is very bad. So Becker goes to ICE detention, and then we started a small protest outside for the next Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I think he was taken on Saturday. Sunday we rested. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we were there every day, not through the night, but just during the day. And then on Wednesday evening, I think we got reports that he was dumped out on the street. No documentation, no nothing, just like the clothes he came with.
In Tacoma, Washington.
In Tacoma.
Crazy.
Yeah, where he has no contacts, knows no one. So there's a camp out there essentially set up because this is what they do. So there's a nonprofit and some advocates that work out there near the Tacoma ICE Detention Center for when people get, just kicked out to the curb, that they can pick them up and give them a warm meal, get them showered, and get them in contact with anyone, get them their next steps, basically. So they helped him get his documentation back from ICE, and then helped get him back home here so he could go back to work and live his life.
And so that subsequently led to him filing a lawsuit against the City of Whitefish for what exactly?
I believe they violated some of his constitutional rights as a person in the United States, which I know everybody would like to believe that our rights only in our Constitution only apply to citizens. Some rights only apply to citizens, but some rights apply to every human being within our borders. And that would be the Fifth Amendment,
yep.
which is due process. But so in that's what allows him to sue the city of Whitefish.
Yep.
And essentially it's racial profiling, right? That they racially profiled him.
Oh yeah, the Fourth Amendment protects people, not citizens, but people, from unreasonable searches and seizures of their person, home, papers, and effects, generally requiring a warrant based on probable cause to justify such actions. 14th Amendment, ratified in 1886, grants birthright citizenship, guarantees equal protection of the law and due process to all people under a state's jurisdiction, and extends civil rights protections to all Americans. So that's, for citizens and people under a state's jurisdiction.
Right. And so him being here,
Yeah.
I assume then that he's under the state's jurisdiction.
He is a person under the state's jurisdiction. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that state jurisdiction includes the Whitefish Police Department. Okay, cool.
Yeah, because he was here in Whitefish. So we'll see how that pans out. I'm really excited that that's happening and that he's, kind of like courageous enough to go through that process.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people won't.
Right. That kind of set you guys in motion. So talk about, do you want to talk more about why you guys decided to start these protests, what the purpose of it is?
Okay, so I grew up Catholic, and I want to clarify that I don't mean, grandma made me get baptized Catholic. I served on the Catholic Youth Coalition Board of Western Montana from 2014 to 2017. During that time, I got confirmed, and I had already received other sacraments. And this wasn't bullshit to me, I took it very seriously. And I want to read you something I learned. This is my journal that I brought to daily mass with me. It's used. And I have an entry from December 12th, 2014, where I was given a quote from Pope Francis by one of my youth leaders that I wrote down. So this was said by Pope Francis in, I believe, 2013, but, sometime before 2014 at least. And he says, "I prefer a church which is bruised, hurting, and dirty because it has been out on the streets, rather than a church which is unhealthy from being confined and from clinging to its own security." And below that, I've written my own notes that say, "Get dirty and get them home." And I want my former youth leaders and my former Catholic peers to know that I took that seriously, and that I still believe in it. And they made me this way. And I hope that they take responsibility for that and continue to stand with me and for what they at the time claimed to believe, which was of the dignity of the migrant, basically. John Paul II talks about that a lot. Francis, obviously. I will talk later about what specifically happened to Louisa and Fergie and what is happening to them, or what we believe is happening to them in these detention centers. And I believe it is an assault on the dignity of the human person. And if you believe that we as a congregation are part of Christ's earthly body, then I would call to my church and ask them to see this for what it is, which is an assault on Christ. There's the commandment that says to love your neighbor as yourself, which originally comes from Leviticus, the book of the law in the Old Testament. And Jesus doesn't repeat most of those laws, but he does pull that law out, and he says it's the second greatest commandment that everybody should follow. Several times, more than once, he says that. And I still believe that. Again, that's why I'm the way that I am. There's a lot of talk, and Jesus has some things to say about people who are all talk as well. We have a responsibility to be laborers for peace, and it's work.
Such a good point. You do look at like Pope Francis from Argentina, and just how much he diverted from the traditions of the previous popes. The way he acted, the way he dressed, the way he just went out and was like going and hanging out in the streets. Probably because I imagine that it gets a little boring in there. But religion in general gets hijacked, and we've obviously seen it not just become hijacked, but weaponized. And then it's like the politicization of religion, obviously, has also been incredibly impactful in creating targets of fear of who are the bad guys and this whole thing. And I commend you for that. That is incredibly beautiful where you're coming from. And I think that's something that, especially the keyboard warriors that love to comment on these articles about like these protesters, to them understand like where you guys are coming from and where we should all be coming from. At least where we should all be understanding the viewpoints of these immigrants and what the communities should be doing, and not just demonizing, our fellow Americans. I have this running joke. Do you know who hates Americans more than anyone? Americans. So anyway, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, well, and that's what we want people to know, is that the three of us are just people, and so are these people that are being detained.
So you were talking about the story of the mom and the daughter. Who are they, and what was their story? Colton, you want to take this one?
I know some things.
Yeah.
From what I know, a mother and her 17-year-old daughter, Louisa and Fergie, they live in our community, and they went to the scene of an accident to help.
Were they just like driving by and it was like an accident? Like was it an evergreen? I think I read.
It was an evergreen.
Yeah. An evergreen. And when they were at the scene, I don't know exactly which group is responsible for it, but they ended up being asked for their basically to show ID and what their immigration status was. That was like probed, and they detained them and took them to Whitefish Border Patrol, and there's probably some more information that Leonette knows.
But it's the same thing. They were just targeted because they were non-white or just didn't speak English, and they were just trying to help. And so, so it seems to be systemic in a way.
Oh yeah, you can talk about that.
One of the important things to know about this particular case with Lisa and Fergie is it was one of the first times that we'd seen the Border Patrol pick up a woman and a child. I don't know for a fact if it's the first. There may have been others, but it's one of the first ones that we were aware of. And so that marks a turning point, essentially, in their strategy and their policy in our area. We know that that's happened in other cities across the United States because and I know they don't, I don't know if they report this stuff on the news or not, but, we get our information through all kinds of different channels these days, not just the news on TV. So we knew that they were first going after men and workers, specifically, and then once they run out of those folks to pick up, then they start turning towards picking up women and children. And this happened in the last administration as well. And that goes to like a little bit of like my background and where I come from. And I moved here, when I mentioned I moved here most recently from Oregon. And so when I was living in Oregon, I lived in the Willamette Valley, in one of the most heavily Latino communities in Oregon, like 70% Latino in that area in the Willamette Valley because of the agriculture. And it's been that way for a long time. So at that time, all of the undocumented migrant workers that were living there, working there, picking your food, putting food on your table. The Willamette Valley is a breadbasket of America. Lots of our food, especially in the Northwest, comes from there. So they were experiencing raids during the Trump administration's time. And then, of course, all of the information about the conditions in detention centers, inhumane and unsanitary and dangerous conditions in detention centers started to come out. That information does not get reported by the government. They don't tell you how nice their detention centers are or how not nice their detention centers are or how safe or unsafe they are. That information comes from lawyers and advocates who are communicating with people who are in detention. So when those reports start to come out, later you'll get watchdog groups that'll confirm them. And that happened at the end of Trump's administration. But during that time, all these reports are coming out of unsanitary conditions, like unlivable conditions, as well as abuse, neglect, essentially torture, what would be described as torture. If you're keeping people up for long periods of time, keeping the lights on all the time, the heat or the temperature is unbearable, it starts to equate to a form of torture. Not to mention the psychological torture that occurs like during that time of detainment. But then on top of that, you start to have reports of abuse of children, and like sexual violence towards children. And all of that turned out to be true. So that framed and families being separated, right? Which became a policy during that time. Because having families together was, too difficult or too complicated or whatever. And then at the end of Trump's administration, there's a whole bunch of lost kids. Nobody knows where they are, where they went. That happened. Like, we don't talk about it anymore, but that actually happened. So now we come into this new time of a new Trump administration. They've already done this. So what I'm seeing is like, okay, they're going to start taking people and putting them in ICE detention again. It's going to be the same horrible conditions. I'm starting to see like, wow, these are concentration camps because of the fact of what a concentration camp is. It does not require a gas chamber to be a concentration camp. It's just simply where you have a concentrated group of people and they're not allowed to leave. And then you have all the effects of concentrating people in a small amount of space, which is how do you feed them? How do you provide, meet all their needs? How is it sanitary? How is it safe? That's actually really hard. Anybody who's ever this is a stupid example, but if you've ever hosted any kind of event where you have to keep people in a space for a period of time and take care of them and make sure their needs are met, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of resources. And if you fail at it, bad things happen. And in this case, really bad things can happen. So once they started to do these detainments, again, I already knew they weren't starting here. They were going to be starting here because they already knew what they could do and what they could get away with. They did not have consequences for the last administration for the harm that they committed against people. I don't know any situation where anybody had to suffer the consequences of their actions for hurting women and children and men who were in detention in the last Trump administration. Somebody can prove me wrong, but I didn't hear of it. So that's why, for me, I was like, well, this is low-hanging fruit. This is something very easy for us to, work protests around and start working on and helping with Valley neighbors to see how we can reduce the harm that's being committed to members of our community who are being taken, and how to, if possible, prevent people from going into ICE detention, because it's one of the worst places in the world to be. You do not want to end up in ICE detention. Everybody's like, oh, it's fine. They'll just put them in there and deport them. Maybe not. I don't know, and you don't know either. So that's why it's this is important work. This is important. It's human rights work, essentially, in our very own community. And we have human rights work in our community, with child sex trafficking. And this is akin to that. Yeah. It's make no mistake that child sex trafficking in Montana and in the United States focuses on Indigenous women. And when you look at the demographic of who's being picked up, these are Indigenous people from Latin America.
Mm-hmm. So are they still in ICE detention, or where are they at now?
They are. They're in an ICE detention center in Texas.
In Texas? So they went from here, they got arrested. When was this? This was a few weeks ago?
Sunday night.
This was Sunday
night.
Okay.
We protested Monday night, and they transported them Tuesday morning. And by the time they found them on Thursday, they were in Texas.
Holy
So
smokes.
I'm guessing they must have flown them, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't think you can get to Texas from here that fast.
No, they're Venezuelan, right?
No, they're from Honduras.
Or from Honduras. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but similarly to Venezuela, Honduras had a protected status, and the United States, or people from Honduras had a protected status and the opportunity to apply for asylum because we ripped apart their country.
Yeah.
And that's another piece of when people ask, oh, are they legal or illegal? I'm like, does it really matter when your country is responsible for tearing theirs apart?
Yeah.
Like, I don't care. Because it's like, was it legal or illegal for the United States to go in and ruin country after country in Latin America and tear apart, their homes, like through instigating war? I don't think I would call that legal. So who's to say? And then on top of that, I'm Mexican American. When people talk about Mexicans, and there is no protected status for Mexican Americans. It doesn't matter if our country is torn apart by cartels and drugs or not, right? There never was. I don't think there ever will be. But at the end of the day, I ask people, hey, who's buying the drugs? Who's doing the drugs? It's Americans.
The majority, like the vast majority of weapons that are like illegally procured
in Mexico
come from the United States, and that requires that our government lets them through from our side, and it's mostly Americans who are taking those guns to Mexico.
Well, yeah, was it Operation Fast and the Furious, which was the operation to leak firearms into Mexico to track to see where they went? And then those exact weapons were used to like kill federal agents in some battle or something.
Yeah, there's a long
like
history of arms trafficking to Mexico.
Yeah.
Like long.
Sanctioned
history.
or unsanctioned.
Yep. Yeah,
But it's
exactly.
been
Whether it's the
both.
government or
Yeah.
other people. But at the end of the day, if people want to stop the flow of drugs from Mexico to the United States, they have to stop buying drugs and they have to stop consuming drugs. Like, that's at the end of the day. Because I'm like, literally everybody's like, oh, Mexico's ruined America. And I'm like, American addiction has ruined my home country, like the land of my ancestors.
Right.
And now they are trying to put the pieces back together. They have a great president, and she's working on lifting people out of poverty and, reinvigorating their infrastructure and taking care of the people, the working people, the real people of Mexico. But at the end of the day, I'm like, if you could all actually just address your addiction problems and maybe some of your childhood traumas, then you would actually see a lot less people coming from Mexico, because they don't need to leave because they're not being ravaged by drug cartels.
It's almost like a new form of chemical warfare and financial warfare. It's a great way to weaken our society, because obviously China is creating the precursors, and they're working with like a lot of the triads. I just saw this great documentary on Vice about how the triads are working with the cartels to help launder their money to China, and then they create assets, which then they're able to buy property in America. And it's this amazingly sophisticated system to get money out and to weaken our social systems. So it's like, why go to war with America when we can just slowly grind away at it?
Right, because all the fentanyl might be coming through Mexico, might be coming through Canada.
Yeah.
It's all coming from China, right?
Yeah.
So
all the precursors, and
we see our community fractured and struggling and being torn apart. We see generations of people who were raised by folks who were struggling with trauma, addiction to various substances, whether it was alcohol. At the time, it was meth. So the people who are my age now were raised by a lot of people who were addicted to meth and using meth, and they neglected their children and kids. And even if you weren't in a home like that, you grew up with kids who were having that experience. So when we're like, what's going on in the Flathead? Like, why are people so angry? And it's like, well, if you're dealing with you're literally dealing with generational trauma in the Flathead Valley, and it hasn't been addressed. We look at the reservations and we turn our nose up at them here in this valley, but they have generational trauma, and they know, and they're addressing it, and they use their resources to address it. What we've done in the Flathead Valley is actually take away the resources that would address generational trauma, and this is what we're left with, and it's like being, it's tearing at the seams.
yeah. So the mom and daughter got picked up and taken to the border patrol station here in Whitefish, right? And how did you guys respond?
Well, I didn't find out right away, but when I did find out, after a day, like I was at class all day long, and I found out, well, let me see. I think I found out
Midday Monday?
midday Monday, but I think I only, let's see, midday Monday, and I think I showed up after class. So
At FECC or?
yeah, at the community college, and so I went to the store and I got some food and things for people who are already out there. Just wanted them to not have to worry about that for the some amount of time. And I went over there 6:30 ish, and I was out there until the next morning and 8:30 a.m.
So it sounded like you didn't want to just sit by and not do anything.
I couldn't just sit by, because to me, if I'm silent about it, or if I don't stand up for my community, then I'm not being a good person as part of the community, right? We have each other's backs when something bad is happening, and if someone's doing something wrong, we have to stand up and say that, right? I'm not one to sit and not point that out, I think, which maybe surprised some people. Like, some people are saying, like, what are you doing? You're supposed to be this like kind, polite person. Never been in trouble. Never been I went to the vice principal's office once, but it was not me that was supposed to be called there. It was a different person with my name. So I'd never been in trouble, right?
Yeah.
So why would you do something like this? Well, being a good person is not just being kind and polite. It's also you stand up to bullies and you say that there are things that are right and wrong, and there's more to it, I guess. I don't know. I'm a little bit of a loss for words over it, but and there's good people in my life who they still don't understand it yet. They still can't see that, though they're supposed to care about humanity, they still haven't connected that to an immigrant or a child that like someone who is a little bit, they feel there's a separation from them.
If there had been a mom and a daughter arrested under these sort of pretenses, who was white per se, the whole community or a part of the community would be up in arms about it.
There's no way they would have been transported.
What was your interactions with the local law enforcement like when they showed up, when you guys were protesting?
Yeah, so our interactions with Border Patrol tend to be pretty tense. They at one point did try and run us over with their vehicles, and when the Whitefish police came out to a call to respond to a call about, I believe it was a chair in the road, I was like, oh, that's interesting. Would you like to see a video of them trying to run me over with their truck? And Whitefish PD was like, yes, we would. So I'm like, here, let me show you that video. So these are not, what they're doing and what we're doing, these two things are not equal. So when I stand there in front of their truck demanding to see inside their truck to see if they're transporting a woman and a child, and they're in a truck, they're wearing body armor, they have guns, I have nothing. I told the Whitefish PD, I was like, I am unarmed. I'm simply standing here as myself. 5'6", 160 pounds, mom of two kids. That's all I got. And so for them to come at me the way they do, this is not an equal amount of force. For me to stand in front of their truck and demand that they talk to me is not nearly as threatening, as being in a vehicle with guns trying to push into and run me over when I'm standing in the in a sidewalk driveway area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the Border Patrol is constantly trying to paint us in this light like we're some really scary thing. Do I think they're scared of us? Yes. But they're scared of us not for the reasons that you should be scared of someone, right? If you're doing the right thing, if you're acting in your official capacity, if you're upholding, there's the spirit of the law and the letter of the law, right? And so the spirit of the law would be that you want to keep people safe. And if you're doing that, you shouldn't have anything to worry about from your community. If you are, going by the letter of the law, but not the spirit of the law in their case, which is like, oh, we can detain these people because they don't have a legal immigration status. It's like, well, you can do that. But by doing so, you're harming your community and making everybody unsafe by violating, our rights through racial profiling and different things. And then not to mention the detainment centers that you're putting them in are like violating human rights. So none of this is good. All of this is harming your community. And then you're going to have to face your community if you decide to do that. And they don't like that. And I think that is why we're so threatening to them. We are literally a mirror of what they're doing. And we make them look at their, we make them look at their soul. And think about why they're doing what they're doing and what the impacts are. And I believe that every person inside of them has, like, for lack of a better word, God inside. And so if you have that voice, which I believe every human does, it's what makes us human, then you know what's right and wrong. And when you're doing something that's not consistent with, the creator or God and that like divine energy, then and it tears you apart. And it could just be like a little thing, but when it's a big thing, it tears you apart in a big way.
Aren't they just taking orders from their higher ups?
Yeah, Colton can speak to that because of his ancestry and his family and where he comes from.
Yeah. And
how the defense of taking orders goes.
My family has a long military history. My great-great-grandfather was a colonel in the army. And so he was active in World War II and World War I and World War II.
Wow.
And at the end of World War II, he served as a war crimes judge for Borkum Island or Ludwigsburg, the war crime trials there.
Crazy.
And he was a judge, and also he served as a deputy security commandant at the Nuremberg prison when they had the Nuremberg trials, which was the most infamous with people like Göring, these Nazi war criminals who had to answer for what they were doing. And so like from that, I've always known that we're not on the side of, we are against fascism, and we're against mistreating people, and we're against causing violence like that. That's not the right side to be on, and it's not the right side. In my family, it's never been on the right side. And I think in American history, for Americans, what it has meant to be an American has been to be opposed to those horrible things and to want justice if those things happen, that we stand up against it. And so that has always been like a really important story to me, like the morals in that. And I see that today happening, and I think that, I can see the same patterns with what's happening in our country, with the, more and more hatred and rhetoric of hate against mainly minorities and people who are different and disagree than from oneself. There's so much demonizing people because I don't know, a lot of times to see it as these deeper insecurities within people. So they're trying to protect themselves, but when they end up going along with this because it's an easier answer, it's an easier way to be, in our politics, we've been really avoidant of a lot of the difficult questions, and we've gone for scapegoating someone else, blaming our issues on someone who's an easy target. And right now we're at the point where we're doing these terrible things to people, to immigrants mainly, and people based off their race, right? And there's so many negative things here and people kind of act like, well, that's the way it's been, that's the way it's supposed to be. I was born in Whitefish, And some people act like you have to be born here in order to understand it and in order to really belong here. But from what I can tell is that we weren't about that when I was born here. And it's not so much about having been born here than like the kind of person that you are that makes you a member of your community, you know? So, and none of us can say that every single one of our ancestors was born here. Everybody knows, they should know, that their family did immigrate. And so they're descendants of immigrants. And so my grandfather, well, he fought for America and took on Nazis in a very direct way.
Actual fascists.
Judged fascists who are Nazis. People like Goring. Like that, our family was still from Europe before that, right? And those Europeans were from somewhere else, and so on. Mm-hmm. And so none of us can really say with honesty that the issue we have with them is because they're immigrants. So it is and if it is, then it's irrational, you know, because it's a double standard, it's hateful, it's not loving your neighbor. I think that meant a lot when you said that. It's like, if those are the values that we claim to have, that we do value human life, and that we do treat each other fairly, and then that's inconsistent with these actions that our government's taking. So we have to stand up for it if we are on that right side, right? I think one of the things we've heard a lot is, well, that's the law. So if you break the law, it's immoral. But the law is not automatically what is moral. And that's something that some people still don't understand yet. The law, there's been many things which are illegal now that used to be legal, and which we know are immoral. And like, honestly, slavery was the established law of the time. Segregation was established law of the time. Women didn't have the right to vote for many years in our country.
Child brides.
Yeah, child brides. There's so many examples of this, and where legality does not equal morality. Our morals, who we are, that makes us good people, is something that is transcendent of the law. And so the law should reflect our values and trying to live up to our standards of morals, not the other way around, where we lower our standards to fit this and to go along with the flow because it's the easiest thing. We have to stand up against it because we know it's wrong.
How do you respond? It seems like you guys responded pretty, not very, like, you weren't out there trying to like burn down the Border Patrol building.
The first protest with Becker was very peaceful and very like uneventful in many ways, right? This one, you know, if you, as a community, when you engage in protest, that's where you start, right? Is with a peaceful protest, with your signs, chants, food, music, dance, laughing. This one, kicked up a notch in that we're learning how to stand up for what's right and use our voices. So, and I posted videos of this and people did not like it, but that's okay because they need to learn how to use, it is time to learn how to use your voice. If you don't know how, you better figure it out soon, because you're going to need to. I promise you. I know you don't want to listen to me. I get it. I go to pick up and drop off at school. People avoid me like the plague. They don't want to hear it. And I stand there and I'm like a literal symbol of what it's like to stand up to authority when you see something wrong. But what we did is every time Border Patrol would enter and exit a building, we would yell at them. And this is part of civil disobedience. It's not, there's a difference, right? So you can just be an asshole and say rude, mean things and talk down and bully and all this other stuff you can do, right? And we all know how to do that. Or you can take another approach. and this is more in line with the philosophies of civil disobedience, which are inherently peaceful. But when someone is doing something wrong, to highlight the moral inconsistencies in their behavior in such a way to pressure them and shame them into making different choices, right? So when the Border Patrol comes out and we tell them, what are you doing? That's a woman and a child in there. Do you know what detention centers are like? Do you know what the conditions are? Do you know where you're sending them? What gives you this right? How do you think this is right? What about your wives and your children that get to sleep in their beds tonight? I dropped my kids off at school at 8:30 on Monday morning. I was at the Border Patrol after I dropped my kids off at school. And I just can't imagine not being able to do that. Or having to be a parent in detention with a kid and trying to make it okay for them while you're in crisis yourself because you don't know where you're going or what you're doing. But at the same time, understanding and knowing that where you came from, Honduras, was so much worse that you were willing to take those risks anyway. That's what people don't understand. They're like, oh, well, they know the risk. It's like, well, does that mean that we should make them suffer because they knew the risk? But it's like, have you ever been to Honduras and like not on vacation at a resort? Like we go to Latin America and we go to their resorts and don't see any people of color or hear any Spanish or have to have any inconvenience, but like they're real people there and they have, circumstances of where they struggle. And that's why they come. They face like alligators in jungles to come here. Right? So there is an understanding of how hard it is and they come anyways. People need to think about why. It's not for fun. It's out of necessity. So then, yeah, once they're here and that's, these are the issues that they're facing. It's like, well, that's why they're facing them is because it was much worse than where they came from.
What was, like, when you showed them the video of you guys almost getting run over, were they like, I mean, do they have the jurisdiction to be like, okay, well, they hit and run, we got to arrest the Border Patrol agent? Is that, or like,
no,
what?
Their response is, well, they have the right to enter and exit their building.
Right.
And I'm like, they do. Do they have the right to run us over in order to do so?
Because your guys are on the sidewalk, which is public property.
It's the City of Whitefish.
City of Whitefish, so you're on public property.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the street, I believe, gets into the county.
Yep.
Because but for
It's a
some reason,
highway.
that sidewalk right there is maintained and owned by the City of Whitefish.
Okay. Yeah.
So, and then once you get into the parking lot and stuff, that's the federal, I believe they lease that building, but it's leased federally by the Border Patrol. So
were you guys arrested for trespassing then?
yeah, we got 3 charges that morning. Criminal trespass. These are all misdemeanors. So criminal trespass, disorderly conduct, and obstruction.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, we did notify the Whitefish police of what was going on, how dangerous the behavior was that we were experiencing with Border Patrol, and asked if we could call them for assistance to
interesting.
protect us from the Border Patrol.
Yeah.
And and they said that, give us a call, we'll come out. And we're like, all right, just letting you know that they're kind of crazy. And we don't trust them, and we don't trust that they will protect our rights at all.
Yeah.
And that was made like abundantly clear when they tried to drive through us. Like, there's no reason that a law enforcement agency should be driving through people. That's what we expect of like crazy people.
Yeah.
Right? Not law enforcement.
The lawful response to you standing in front of their car should have been to detain you, not to try and roll over you. And so that really showed us again that we couldn't trust them to do what was right or what was lawful, and that we wanted the Whitefish PD on our side to be there to witness what was happening.
Smart to be transparent with the local police department and not be against them too, because that would almost just make make it even harder for you guys to have like a voice and be taken seriously.
Yeah, and that's a tenet of civil disobedience. What civil disobedience shows is that we do still believe in our societal structures and the rule of law and the judges and the courts and law enforcement. But what it's saying is that there's we need to make a stand in some way, shape, or form that's very strong, and that sends a strong message. But when we engage in it that way, we're doing so peacefully. Like, again, I was unarmed. I'm not attacking anybody's cars. There's no baseball bats. Like, I'm not like the Beyonce Lemonade video, just like, busting windows. Like, that to me, that's violence. Standing in front of a vehicle, assuming the vehicle's not on fire or somebody's not dying inside, like an emergency vehicle, right, with the lights on, that would be violent, right, to prevent them from moving. But there is in no way, shape, or form any violence in standing in front of a car that's just trying to move, because that's relatively peaceful behavior. And it's also consistent with expecting, that the law will be enforced the way that we have always understood it to be enforced, which is not by driving through people, but with arresting and detaining people.
What is your perspective now in hindsight of what happened as far as like you guys getting detained and arrested and, these charges brought against you? Does it seem like a win? Is it kind of neutral? Is it just like, this is just the next chapter in the story of what you guys are trying to do?
We step into the world of the unknown.
Yeah.
For us.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I have faith that we're not the first people that have done this. We certainly hope to not be the last. In this very week that this happened, 11 lawmakers were detained at an ICE detention facility and arrested for staging a sit-in and demanding to observe the conditions of the ICE detention center, which they have the right to do. And instead they were all arrested. So that happened like 2 days after our arrest. So we're like, all right, It's happening. And then of course other protesters were arrested in Chicago. So lots of people are being arrested across the nation right now for standing up for their First Amendment rights and engaging in various levels of civil disobedience to stand up to an authoritative regime that is trampling on our rights and leading us in a very bad direction as a country. I mean, there's a lot that we can do to come together, and so much that we have in common that we're experiencing that we can work on and create better lives and better communities. But scapegoating and looking for the easy out of someone to blame is not it. It's just going to be hard work of like healing the trauma that we experienced during COVID, addressing mental health issues, starting to heal young men right now who are like not doing well. There's a reason that they're turning to extremism, and we need to address that and hold them accountable. And, there's a lot there to unpack. But, I think Tupac said it best, that if we hate our women and we harm our women and we violate our women, we create a generation of babies who grow into men who continue to hurt women. So, instead of taking from our women and hurting our women, let's support our women. Let's stand up for our women. Let's protect our women.
What can be done now for the mother and daughter, or is it just kind of wait and see? Do they have legal representation? Do we know?
They're working on legal representation still for them, as well as there were 5 other people, I believe, there were 3 other people taken that night as well.
From the Flathead Valley?
Yes.
Okay.
At that same traffic incident. So there were 5 people picked up in total.
That's crazy.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a lot. And a lot of people don't know or understand this, but law enforcement, I believe, put it on their Facebook page the other day, the Border Patrol did, or DHS or something, that they've detained over 130 people in our area.
That's a lot of people.
It's a lot of people.
And again, I'm guessing most of these people are just here for work, doing...
I don't know any single one of them that wasn't working.
Yeah. Were any of these part of the new Jalisco Generation cartel or the Sinaloa cartel? Were there any ties to the actual cartels?
I haven't heard of anybody that's picked up that was a criminal.
Because it seems like if there was a criminal record, that would be like blasted.
That's true. They would be. They do control the narrative unless we get involved, and then we obviously have an opportunity to, reshape the narrative in a compassionate and empathetic way. But no, I believe that if they were catching criminals, they would definitely be putting it on their social media pages. And I think maybe there was one. I think I saw one.
Well, because I don't know how many criminals they need to take under the cover of night and avoid any sort of public knowledge of it, keep it a secret.
Why would they be hiding it?
They hide it for a reason. Mm-hmm. I highly doubt hardly any of them are probably criminals. And sometimes when we say criminal, are we saying someone who has a traffic ticket? It sort of depends. And I know a lot of people who they've accused of being part of Tren de Aragua had like an autism awareness tattoo. Some people had like Air Jordan tattoos, like things that are obviously not actually associated with gangs. And so they're lying to us. They're showing us that we can't trust them to do this. And then they're hiding information from us. When they're not lying, they're just not telling us. So with Luisa and Fergie, they're currently in a detention center in Texas. In these detention centers, they need commissary money. So this is a big business. There's government contractors, independent contractors who are profiting off of the detention of Latino immigrants in our country. And believe me, I'm sure it's a good profit. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing it. I don't know. I'm sure that a lot of your listeners are aware of government contracts and how inflated sometimes they can be. Like that is literally what Doge was about, was government waste. The biggest government waste is in independent contractors that are taking government contracts because they get paid really high dollar for the services that they provide. So like when Becker was in detention center, like soap was like $10 or something. The prices are extreme. And then for any contact, they can get an iPad to contact people, but they have to put money in. So each call costs. The iPad itself costs because they're renting it, right? Then you have to put money, I don't know, and like you have to download an app. There's a lot of money. So Becker's detention itself and communicating and getting his needs met he was in there for 4 to 5 days, was, I don't know, somewhere around $80 to $100 of money, I think, that I saw go into his commissary. Wow. Possibly more. So if you multiply that times the number of, the number of people in detention and the number of, I think I saw numbers about tens of thousands more people being in that kind of detention than there had been in like previous years, with more recently. And some of that, there's whole prisons that some, especially private companies that contract, just were empty or were, way below the level that those prisons want to have people at. So they have an incentive where they want people to put in prison. And
there it is.
There's a lot of money to be made off that. People in the younger generation also are just not committing crimes at the same rates because of all the programs that focus on youth, after school programs, poverty elimination, things like WIC and
birth control. So families that can do more family planning. And then, then there's things like the tax credit that was working very well. So many things where there was a massive reduction, and the biggest, the main cause of crime is poverty. So crimes of poverty dramatically decreased, and so there's a cliff. And so they're building those prisons based off of more like how many people who were in third grade they were expecting to grow up to be prisoners, to be incarcerated, right? Oh, the school to prison pipeline.
Yeah, and that just wasn't, and things changed. We were doing a better job reducing poverty and reducing crime, and so they needed someone else to fill that spot. And so we saw that some of the first people to max out their campaign contributions and then to start spending a ton of money on independent expenditure were those private prison companies and ICE contractors and, of course, then defense contractors. But yeah.
Yeah. So, they have like that famous saying, it's just like, if you want to know who's benefiting from something, you just have to follow the money. Right. And so what we see is money. So, which leads us to the money that we did raise to help Louisa and Fergie. We're sending them over $2,300 from this community.
Oh, amazing.
It could have expanded beyond this community just because it did get shared a lot. But even if people shared it outside of the community and the money came back in, it still is connected to this community.
Yeah.
So I am really proud of the community response in that way. And so that can go towards their commissary, towards legal fees, and towards whatever comes next for them, because we don't know. But having that there is going to provide them some security, so that like we know money talks, and you need money to get through legal processes. So that's where they sit. And I know Courtney Brooks is a really good friend of Louisa's, and that's how we found out that she had been detained, and has been connected with her and her family, Louisa's family, so that we can get resources to them. So Courtney's going to be following up with a lot of that. But if you follow like Flathead Democracy on Instagram or Facebook, we'll make sure to like share all of the efforts that are being made to help them, so that people can look for opportunities to help. But, other things that we wanted to tell people is like, hey, let's stop just talk, and let's start walk. Like, we need people to actually stand up and do things. Resharing stuff on social media is not enough. It certainly does things, and it can help, educate people. But once you're educated and you already know, and your friends already know on Instagram, you're like 5 friends that look at your stories. No, it's like at a certain point, it's like, okay, you get it. You all know what's happening. You know what's going on. You know it's not right. So then what comes next? So, we host through Indivisible, a lot of protests. We have a big one coming up on the 18th. We also have a vigil for Gaza coming up on October 8th. You can sign up for our email list. In our Instagram stories, there's a little link to sign up for our email list, and we'll send you an email every week. Except for last week, because I got arrested, so we had to skip last week, but it was the first time we had skipped, and right? I'm like, do I get a pass? Yeah. So yeah, we send out an email every week with like local democracy, activities or process, like political processes that are going on locally. Like, hey, here's a land use thing that you need to go to this meeting if you live in Whitefish or Columbia Falls, or there's, municipal elections coming up. Are you signed up to, or are you registered to vote? And is your address up to date? You can click here and check on it. Just all these reminders of how to engage locally here in our community with the issues that are going on here. This happens to be an issue that's going on here. So that's why we focus on it, because it is happening in our community. This is not far away in some far off land, but it's here. So Flathead Democracy, Flathead focuses on the Flathead and what's going on here.
Awesome.
Yeah. So that's what we ask people is like, hey, if you think this is terrible and you're like appalled that this is happening in our community, then look for a way to get involved. When we talk about, what we want to see coming from this, we want to build awareness of the inhumane conditions of detention centers, understand that they're akin to concentration camps from World War II, and other genocides and wars across, space and time of our world. And also understand, think about people who are here without documentation and are not citizens. We need a legal pathway for citizenship for people who have been working and living here. That is the only reasonable and humane response. I personally do not accept anything less than that. Like, folks are not criminals. They're beloved members of their community. They go to our schools. They work. They live. They're people just like us. Your ancestors got a pathway to citizenship. These folks do not have a pathway to citizenship. give them a pathway to citizenship. Your ancestors' pathway to citizenship was like they just showed up at Ellis Island and wrote down their name. They took some citizenship classes and some English classes, and then they sent them on their way. Mm-hmm. That was it. They got tested for like disease, maybe like lice.
Right.
Yeah. And the same thing at Angel Island. It's like all you had to do was sign your name in a book, take some classes that they gave you, right? They gave you the citizenship classes. They gave you the English classes. And then voila, now you're American. That was what your ancestors went through. Give these people the same courtesy. So we just, ask people to engage and get involved and see what they can do, and start talking to each other. Let's stop hiding our heads in the sand about these issues, thinking that they don't impact us. They're here every day. You see me at pickup, you see me at drop off, you know what I'm doing. Say something, do something. Let's stop ignoring it.
How do we ignore with the community members who are more on the right or more really hate what you guys are doing, standing up for the immigrants and that sort of thing? Or because there's like a huge younger generation that are very organized, like the young Republicans. Have you guys had any contact with them? I mean, I'm sure they probably don't care, but maybe they do. I don't know. Yeah. Because I've actually talked to a couple of young kids who actually do care, who are Republicans and conservatives, and some of them actually are concerned with what's happening. I think actually this is an issue where people realize there's not only going to be huge moral, I hate to say it in this order, not only is there going to be a moral impact, but what about the economic impact? I mean, even Trump came out and says, we got to maybe help the farmers and our hospitality industries, who some of these people rely on these people. But then today on the UN, he also says, we got, no one's coming through the borders anymore, at this UN assembly in New York. Of course, he's going to say what he says, but, he was like, actually, when you got him saying, maybe we got to lighten it up a little bit. So wrap around, how do we have conversations with people that disagree with, this subject or this political ideology?
I mean, in a nutshell, I like to talk to people I like to meet people where they're at. So this is an important issue to me, but I don't lead with this issue in every discussion. When there's especially with young people, it's like they have their own struggles right now, and they live in a world and an economy that has like no hope for them. I put a Facebook message or a Facebook post about affordable housing, and some guy was like, well, blah, 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 boomer something. And, about how young people can just work hard. And it's like, you don't understand, their buying power is so significantly reduced compared to your generation. It's insane. So when I talk to young people, I just connect with them on those issues, and what they need and what they're struggling with, because all the violence, all of the division, all of the hate is coming from a place of like no hope. So if we don't address the needs of young people, and this is just like a really logical, practical perspective from my opinion, more hatred, racism, and division will ensue. So it seems like a weird roundabout way, but I think in order to address racism in our community, we have to address the economic inequality in our community.
Yeah, I have some thoughts, but we talked a little bit about how after we were arrested in the next, 48 or so hours, we saw kind of a surge across the country of this happening in Chicago and in New York. And I think there's sort of a collective consciousness happening where people know that something is wrong. And my friends who are more conservative or perhaps just aren't clued into what's happening, don't care, don't know, they are feeling bad. And I would tell them that, like, if you have been in a depressive episode, a prolonged depressive episode, despite it being a beautiful summer, that I think you should consider that it's not you, and that something is actually wrong, something is actually happening, and that resistance is self-care, and that you should come talk to us and find out what you can do and how you can help yourself and your community.
I'd say I'd tell people about how kind of despondent I could feel over some things that were happening, and through not even necessarily just this year. There's certain degrees to where that's true in the past too. But I realized that doing something about it has made so much of a difference. And being a part of a community that also is thinking along those lines. And when we showed up for Becker, I realized this is a group of people that has my back. And I don't know that everyone has that. I think a lot of people have never really experienced the feeling of people truly having their back. And it's a very special relationship, and it makes our community so much stronger. And so you just invite people to something that they care about. If it's about their healthcare, they should come and start with that and see, what does that do for them? That they can actually not just take it as a negative, but turn it into action. They know that at least they have done something about it. Yeah, I think that these issues, we've already ignored them for so long, and we've let them go in some ways generation to generation, and other ways throughout our lives and throughout the years now. It's just building up, and we're used to ignoring them and avoiding them and wanting to say, I'm not political. Politics doesn't happen to me. And things I do, my job, my schooling, raising a family, being able to afford a house, that's not political. But it is all political. There's a political component to all of that, to having good education because it's fun, to being able to afford housing because we are making smart decisions in the economy, that we're happy because we're not tearing our communities apart, because we could be bringing them together, which makes me happier. I know that. So I think really it is important that we're addressing all of these issues in the ways that they intersect, and that we're meeting people where they're at. I think that's the exact right thing to do. Like, we're not trying to avoid people who have differences even with us on issues. We find where we agree, and then we can work out the rest.
And we'll probably find out there's a lot more we agree on than we think.
I think so, yeah.
So much.
Mm-hmm.
People don't realize when we have protests, whether it's at the Border Patrol, that one's sustained, so it's different. But when you come out, it changes your community. It does something in your world and, the bigger world, but it really changes you. And the people, like, you meet people, you interact with people, maybe people that you already knew, maybe you meet new people, but you actually build community when you come out and do those things and you interact with folks. And some of those Border Patrol protests are like the most impactful. They're a little bit different than the, indivisible No Kings one with, 1,000 people are showing up and it's just a ton of people and it's kind of overwhelming. But when it's a smaller group who are there for a more specific reason, then those bear more fruit in terms of building community. But, when there are different issues, we fight battles on many fronts with Flathead Democracy. So it could be Medicaid. Like, we voted for Medicaid expansion in our state, but now there's some federal legislation coming down that could actually remove our state's ability to fund the Medicaid expansion. So if you want to get involved with that, there's so many issues beyond what we have capacity for. But if people join us, we can, kind of support them like a little baby and give them the resources and the direction they need to actually become leaders in all of these different spaces. So we can talk about the Montana plan, right? Which is going to be a ballot initiative about getting dark money out of politics in Montana. I'm looking for volunteers to lead on that. We have Palestine and Gaza. Young people want to lead and, form that into something, bigger, and have been, right? But want to continue to do so. You have healthcare, and what are some of the other issues that come up? Local democracy, like municipal elections, county, like whatever's happening in the county.
A lot of affordability related things. Mm-hmm. And that can take so many different forms. If it's like we want to talk about a development, or we want to talk about what the legislature or the local governments allow with zoning, or
the
all
land,
kinds
like
of
what is it? The planning process that
There's
Whitefish is going through.
Right now.
Oh, yeah, the
Columbia
20-year plan.
Columbia Falls, Kalispell, Whitefish are all going through that.
We had government review boards. There's just municipal elections you mentioned earlier. Those are important.
Yeah. And then there's all kinds of other issues that come up constantly. And if people want to bring them to us and like come in and then go out, right? Like from Flathead Democracy, because we don't have catalyst. We have one organizer from Forward, Montana, but there's a lot of nonprofits that engage in a lot of that unifying work. And we just don't have that here. So that's why Flathead Democracy formed, is to kind of be that hub where we can bring folks in, help them clarify the issue that they're working on and develop strategy, and then go do it. It's not rocket science, I promise. Like literally anybody can become an organizer. Yeah. So don't be afraid.
Awesome.
Do we have anything to say about the community safety meeting?
Yes. Thank you so much. I knew I was forgetting something. I didn't have time to take notes. Oh yeah. So one other thing that we do want to invite people to is we're going to be, and this is where you got to follow us on socials or sign up for our email list. You can also email flatheaddemocracy@gmail.com and tell us you want to be on our email list too. And we're going to plan a community safety meeting, probably somewhere here in Whitefish, but definitely somewhere in Flathead County, just to talk about community safety with regards to the Border Patrol being a big piece. And then, as we see sort of civil unrest and violence take place across our country, and so much of it is connected back to our community. Also the rise in white nationalist extremist behavior. All of this is really concerning and really hard for families, especially too, like with young children. Like how do you navigate all this as a community member? And so what we're recommending is that we come together as a community and almost like a town hall style, be able to talk about our concerns and the problems that we see, and then start to identify potential solutions and actions that we can take to build up our community's resilience and health and strength, even in the face of everything that's going on.
Well, thank you guys again. I would love to have you guys back on and just keep us posted, and I look forward to coming out and hanging out with you guys sometime. Awesome.